I could talk a bit about my experience with StarLink this week, because it's been an ongoing saga, and I think there's maybe some relevance for people that are living more rural and having to find a way to be on the internet, like myself. It's maybe something that I can add something useful to it.
Yeah, that would be good. I've been working on a paper in my mind about StarLink, and there's good news and there's bad news.
No, tell me.
So I don't want to share my thoughts first. I want to hear your thoughts first, and then I'll share, because you had some experience, like really relevant experience in the last little while. And so why don't you tell people what you've done there? And for people who haven't seen our first interview, you had the courage to leave behind what most people would consider to be a normal life, and sought out a place where you could live comfortably in a pristine electromagnetic environment, and have been enjoying living in that remote place and feeling better while you're there. And yet there's this hunger for community that's difficult to satisfy, and there's a hunger. And your part, a big part of your artistic expression is through technology, right? And so why don't you pick it up from there and talk about how you get on the internet?
Yeah. When I moved here, the biggest draw was, of course, that it was extremely low EMF, and there was just enough signal to be able to run a 4G modem. And I thought, well, let's give that a go and see how that works. But I wasn't happy with how much energy scatter it would create. Like, even though I had it sealed in a sort of a directional dish, so that the most of the energy would go towards the cell towers, and I thought that could work. But I realized it was scattering a lot on the leaves and the trees in the pathway. So I was just basically polluting my own sanctuary here. And so for the second option,
people will have a hard time understanding what you've just said. So you're projecting the radio frequency radiation that's necessary for modern communication towards the cell phone tower. And a portion of it, anytime there's a collision with a surface, some will go through, some will be trapped within, and some will bounce back, even the leaves. So this radiation is being projected in an area where then it bounces back in the leaves, and just that amount that's bouncing back is enough to make you sick. Is that what you were experiencing?
Yeah, absolutely. I also often, people have a hard time imagining what these rays do. I just basically say, everything is transparent to these rays. They can go pretty much through it, except metal and water have more reflective qualities, and the water itself is also a bit absorbent. So it's like pretty much everything looks like a jellyfish, I think, to if you could see in that spectrum of the radio waves that we're using to beam over data. And in some ways I would be better off not to bother with this whole internet thing and just not use technology. And like you said, it is part of what I really enjoy doing. I love the whole tech. Sometimes I feel sorry for myself that I can't use all that new stuff, including the AR and VR and the drones and all that. But it just makes me really sick. So I'm in my quest to find a way to be able to connect with the world, like with you here now. I've been trying to find different ways how to connect to the internet, and ideally I would just have a cable that I plug in and it's all sweet and it's good, and there's not much extra EMF fields coming from it, and that be the end of the story. But in this case, there is no cable coming to this rural property, and so I had two options. One is to try 4G modems, and that, like we just discussed, that created too much of a dirty environment, as in there's more electric or radio frequency fields being scattered around. That basically made it impossible for me to be outside and have the modem on at the same time. So I would have to switch it on, go back into my caravan, and then be sort of safely shielded. So with my second experiment was with StarLink, and that was a bit scary because I know that StarLink is operating at a frequency that I can't measure. So for people to know that a lot of the basic measuring tools that we use, like the Safe and Sound Pro, are up to 8 gigahertz. And the StarLink is actually communicating with the satellites at 12.8, I believe. And so that also doesn't get picked up by the millimeter wave meter. So it falls just right in between. But I've placed it on the property in a space where it's optimally aligned to the sky, so that it can pick up the satellites properly. It's on a long pole, and it's away from where I am. Generally, when I walk past it, I can feel it, like within a couple of minutes. I've forgotten about it a couple of times. And then we were standing up there with other guys talking, blah, blah, blah. And then I started to feel nauseous quite quickly. I realized, oh, hold on. The antenna is there. So I was hoping that the dish, how it's designed, it should be only emitting the signal up straight to the sky, to the satellites. So my hope was that if that is done properly, it should just only beam upwards and not scatter to the sides or down. But I don't think they've done a very good job on that. And yesterday I went into a deep dive trying to improve the situation, because not only do we have to deal with the signal going up to the sky in that range that we can't measure, and it is affecting me. It is also an incredibly noisy, as in dirty electricity noisy, device. The StarLink is putting out so much dirty electricity. It's absolutely horrendous. So I have a static meter, a dirty electricity meter, to see how the grid power, which is powering the StarLink, how it is with and without the StarLink. And when I don't have the StarLink on it, it's about 380 millivolts, which is kind of normal to be expected from a grid power source. And if I put a filter onto it, a static filter, it goes down to 11 millivolts. I personally still don't like AC at all. I can't really be with it for too long. But if it's a clean AC or clean-ish, I can use a power tool for maybe an hour, 2 hours, and I'm funny enough more capable to work with that than with RF exposure from Wi-Fi or Bluetooth. But as soon as I plug in the StarLink, it goes up to 2700, and even beyond the measuring scale of the static meter, it goes beyond 3000 millivolts. And even with the filter, it still stays up, around the 400 or 500 millivolts. It's an incredibly nasty noise that comes from it. With another meter, it's more like a radio meter. It's a German e-smog meter, which doesn't have a very nice working scale. It's a bit just with lights. I mean, it's a good indication, but the sound of it is very sensitive and very precise. It has helped me a lot with figuring out where something was coming from. So I noticed that same sound signature with the StarLink machine itself is actually traveling over the Ethernet cable. And it's about 200 meters away from here with a router and a switch point in between. So I've done a lot of things to make sure that it was done properly. But all the way down at the end of the line, this nasty, it sounds almost like a Star Wars fighter or something. It's really nasty. It's different than your normal AC sound, and that nastiness travels over the Ethernet cable, goes into my dongle, goes into my laptop, then from my laptop goes onto my keyboard, which both are electrically shielded and grounded with a mesh, and it just suddenly puts all that energy still on there. It's in fact so bad that if I uncouple the Ethernet cable, my grounding sheet in the caravan picks it up even when it's not connected. I don't know exactly what kind of nastiness it is, but there's not a single device that I possess that is putting out these kind of fields. Like whatever they've done with StarLink, it is amazing how it catches all the data, how it can communicate with the satellites whizzing over at 17,000 kilometers an hour. It is an absolute marvel of engineering. But what they've done with the dirty electricity and what it puts out, and the fact that it puts it out on an Ethernet cable, a Cat6 cable, is, inexcusable, I think. I don't know what kind of corners they've cut, or they just really don't care about that part. But it makes it almost impossible for me to use it, which is a pity, because I do want to be on the internet, but it's the one thing that I'm struggling with trying to uncouple. I've put it. Sorry, I'm on a rant here, but I've tried to put even a media converter, which is an optical fiber setup, to uncouple this dirty electricity from reaching me, but that had a whole another set of problems in itself with high frequency RF emitting from these things. So I'm back to square one, and I'm not quite sure what to do with it. The static filter has helped a bit. I mean, has helped a lot to bring it down the AC, but it hasn't done that much for all the energy that is coming down the Ethernet cable. So that was a bit of a run around, but I've got good internet, but it's the one big dirty source in my life right now that I am struggling to get rid of, because it does affect me to a point where if I'm not around the computer, not around that Ethernet cable, I feel a lot better. I mean, don't get me wrong, still better than Wi-Fi, by a lot, but I wish that engineers would understand that there is a biological effect from non-thermal, that there is a non-thermal effect from these kind of frequencies, and if they would take that into account, I don't think it would have to cost a lot to make technology a lot more safe.
Mm-hmm. So I'll just briefly kind of breeze through all the technical problems that I heard you say, and you can correct me when I'm done if I get something wrong, but there is this effect around the square, sort of block antenna that you get with the StarLink, and you can't be near that. And the one of the big challenges is that you can't measure that particular frequency range of radio frequency radiation. So you can't go, for example, and take a Safe and Sound Pro 2 up to this square antenna that comes with a StarLink and see how safe a distance is, because it won't read at all. And yet the millimeter wave meter is too high, so it's sort of hiding. The StarLink radiation is sort of hiding between these two instruments' ability to see, and therefore you can't know what the safe distance is. And what I think is tragic is people are putting these things on their homes and on their RVs, and they're just not aware. And people generally feel like it's a curse to be poisoned, electrically poisoned, to such a degree that you can feel, and not in a good way, but feel the synthetic radiation all around you, including, as you just mentioned, AC electricity. However, it does give you and I a benefit when we are in a casual situation, and then we begin to feel those symptoms For me, the brain fog or difficulty with speech or heart palpitation, something like that is like the first to manifest. And I know you have some similar, but maybe not the same symptoms. Anyway, that causes you or I to look around and say, what is the problem around here? I got to leave. And it isn't a matter of looking at something and then seeing, the nocebo effect. It's more like, well, okay, that's what's making me sick. So just so that people might understand that. And then there's the whole issue of, okay, how do you get the internet data to and from that StarLink antenna module? You can place it far enough away from where you're going to be using your computer to be safe. But how do you get it then connected to your computer? Of course, you don't want to use Wi-Fi, which is the default. But you can now, as I understand it, and correct me if I'm wrong, you can disable the Wi-Fi and hook it up to Ethernet. But what people don't understand is that all of that dirtiness, and when I say dirtiness, I'm talking about the radio frequency radiation that's being freely liberated in the environment of that thing. It does follow that cable all the way back to the computer, and the electronics, how it is using the alternating current or AC power to power that device. It has to be changed from alternating current to direct current to power the circuitry. And whatever's going on in there, it creates a huge mess with regard to dirty electricity that then gets coupled along your electric power cord all the way back to your house and then corrupts everything on the house. And then Daniel has tried what would be a great fix if it had worked, which is you go ahead and you break the Ethernet cable, not break it, you just don't bring it all the way back to the house, and you put it to an optical coupler. So it's now turns into light energy that goes across a non-conducting cable. So it doesn't allow that radio frequency radiation to travel along the Ethernet cable anymore and go into your home. But these devices on either side are problematic in and of themselves because they produce a bit of the same effect as, that hash that you're getting that travels along the wires. And then the last factor is the dirty electricity. How do you mitigate that? And it's really copious. I've seen the oscilloscope readouts for what that will do to the power system. So have I got all that correct, and including the part about now you can disable the Wi-Fi and use Ethernet and whatnot? Correct me if I'm wrong.
Yeah, it made me actually, with the Wi-Fi, I think because with version 2, they omitted that option. Like the first version had an Ethernet cable, then the second one didn't, and the third one now has Ethernet again. I wonder maybe they had too much problems with that same sort of dirty signal on it, and maybe that's why they thought, oh, well, let's not bother with it and just omit that. And then by popular demand, they did bring it back, but just didn't really complete the job properly. So yeah. Oh, and to understand, if you want to make proper use of the Ethernet, you actually have to switch out or switch off the whole router part of the StarLink. So when you do that, you're basically back to square one, where you can only use one device on the StarLink. So you have to add a router, an external router that then can give out the addresses so that you can have multiple devices on the Ethernet. That's the only caveat that there is now with it. But yeah, no, including the whole optical coupling, which was a real sad moment because I thought, yes.
Yeah, I got it right.
This is going to work.
Yeah. And, it might work for some people who are not profoundly sensitive, but here's how I think about that. whatever hurts the most sensitive of us, is it not causing damage to everybody? They just can't perceive it, Your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, it's been on my mind a lot. It's like it's such a bizarre state that we're in, that to be such an absolute minority that is feeling this. Like for the first 10 years, I would maybe meet one person a year that would say, yeah, I feel it too, or yes, it does affect me too. Nowadays, it's a lot more people that are starting to catch on to it. And I compare it a little bit to the moments like in the 90s when, everybody was smoking, and there would be one person going like, it's bad for my asthma, or, and the rest of us were like, well, I don't know. It doesn't affect me. I can smoke as much as I want. And yeah, maybe if we smoke 2 packs, then yeah, you might feel not too great. But, my granddad became 80 or 90. So there's enough examples of how we can just dismiss any health effects from smoking from that perspective. But does that mean that smoking in itself is not causing any harm? No, I don't think so. And I think it's the same with the EMF. The only problem is that it's even less visible. Sometimes I feel a bit worried, because I think that if you haven't experienced it, if you're not feeling it, or you haven't picked up what it is doing to you, it's a really hard thing to convey to people, because they're kind of like, well, I don't see a problem, I don't feel it. But I think I agree with you. It is affecting each and every one of us. It's just, when is it going to catch up with you? Maybe it takes 10, 20 or 30 years before you really start to feel it. I mean, I spent at least 15 years deep in tech, and really enjoying it. I mean, it was glued to me. I would be using it all the time. I loved it. I could do all sorts of stuff with it. And then suddenly the body was just, done. I can't handle this anymore. It's too stressful.
Yeah, and me too. My first career was in high tech, so I was right in there. And, sometimes I wonder whether that is why I'm feeling it before other people. But I also take a lesson from my wife, who never has considered herself to be electrically sensitive. She's just married to me and therefore living in a shielded house with me. And the odd thing is now that she can feel when she's sick. In other words, somehow she didn't recognize that she was being harmed before, and now she does. And I don't know exactly how that works, but I've heard others explain the same thing. Spouses are those who became electrically sensitive, who went into pristine environments. And then when they go back into the burn, what's considered to be normal now in society, they really feel the difference. So it's an interesting thing. So here's a question about StarLink. Let's imagine that you could get it working to your satisfaction somehow. What about the moral implications of StarLink?
Yeah, that's a real tough one. Because I think there might be dangers that even go beyond the direct radiation of the planet and all life on it. I have actually been using ChatGPT and the different ones, including Grok from Elon Musk and the other OpenAI ones, to try to assess like how much extra radiation is it putting on the planet, how much elevated levels are we getting in full coverage on everywhere, and the estimations from what I got from that is somewhere between 0.1 microwatts up to 30 microwatts. And both numbers are still worrying to me that it is blanketing the planet with this radiation. The only reason why I went for it, because it seems to me that having an RF connection between the satellite and my module has less life in its pathway than, going vertically seemed like a less intrusive way than going horizontally, where everything in its path is being blasted. And I don't think we can underestimate the amount of energy that's being put out by all these cell towers and all the individual modems and phones on land. I think both situations are incredibly worrisome. And yeah, if you talk about the moral thing, it's like, I feel indeed just by using this internet connection, it's just as bad as, I don't know, buying stuff that is directly linked to slavery or that is putting out huge pollution into the planet. It's a very undesirable situation that we're in. I mean, I've been wondering, why can't we just have more harmonious ways of data communication, and maybe through optical wires? I mean, if we would take this seriously as a collective, as a humanity, I'm sure we could figure ways out forward. But as it is now, it's a very dirty business, and every satellite that gets put up there, partly because of my funding personally, putting money into the coffer, is shooting up another satellite. But if I put that money into the 4G, then there's another cell tower popping up. Both ways are really undesirable. But at the same time, what do I then just let go of any form of communication and not have internet and just basically be silenced? And I think it's my duty as somebody who is basically a canary in the coal mine to use this medium like you're doing to bring it out there, because if we stay silent, people won't know what hit them. It just becomes the new normal. We get sicker and sicker, and gosh, no idea what's going on. I mean, that is basically how it is being approached right now. It's like, oh yes, fertility rates are going down. No idea what it is. Could be the chemicals. Who knows? The EMF. Oh, it could be maybe stress of work. EMF. You know, they're not hearing us, and it's so obvious once you pick up on it. It is not even a. Yeah, that boggles me. And like, what do you think of that? Like, how is it possible that people just will not register on that level, while once you feel it, it's so obvious?
Yeah. And I'm going to answer that, but I think I need to do something to my lighting. Does it look like can you see my image okay? Anyway, back to the moral implications of StarLink. I think you've really put your finger on it exactly, the entire discussion. And so I don't want people to miss one of the things that you said, which is, depending on who you believe, StarLink is radiating the surface of the Earth with anywhere from 0.1 microwatts per square meter to, what was the upper number you thought?
30, which would be quite
30.
a lot.
And so there are people around the world right now who even know what a microwatt per square meter is. And they're thinking, that's no problem. I have 1 million, or I have, 1,000, 100,000. So my friends, where you need to be is between 0 and 1. I mean, if you had my meter just needs to be looking at between 0 and 1. That's where life might be able to exist. And more to the point, I think maybe you and I agree that where I want to be is 0.0001.
Yeah.
I want to be 1,000 times, 10,000 times less than 1. So although the number sounds small, we can't overlook what's being talked about. I've often said the only long-term sustainable protection any of us have against terrestrial radio frequency radiation is terrain. Because you put a mountain or a couple of mountains between you and civilization, and up to this point, it's been great. But if StarLink is indeed radiating the entire surface of the Earth, that means there are no more safe zones. And clearly it can't radiate the entire surface of the Earth all at once. But in an effort to provide service if you have somebody within 3 miles of you, it's going to be radiating your little corner of paradise from above.
Yeah. Yeah.
And, well, sure, you can put a metal roof on your home, and that's probably going to protect you while you're in your house. But what about when you want to be in the garden? What about when you want to be, on the seashore? And so there are profound, I believe, moral implications. Who are they to decide they can radiate the surface of the entire earth without consent? I mean, honestly, that this is egregious violation of morality. And there's a lot of research that indicates that if you took it down even 10,000 times less than what I would prefer, bacteria are still affected. So you've got to ask, is the existence of StarLink what caused the decimation of that insect population in that huge lake in Ireland? I don't know if you saw that story on Arthur Furstenberg's website, but yeah, it's one thing for a human to feel uncomfortable. And of course, Daniel and I and the people that we help, we don't want that. But what's it doing to the birds and the bees, right? So that's part of the moral issue as well. And it's a good conversation about, like, if there's a cell phone tower sitting here, that isn't good. Okay, but if you're over here and you can work out a directional antenna and have 4G LTE broadband service so you can get on the internet, and by the way, that's what I'm using right now. So I'm not innocent here. There are people and animals downstream from me. I have a directional antenna. So between me and wherever that 4G tower is, I'm increasing the RF intensity, however minutely, but I think it's the data that really defines the harm, the amount of data, as well as the intensity. So I'm adding to that. And I don't take it lightly. I don't take it lightly at all. So I also want to agree with what you were saying, Daniel, which is, what then? Okay.
Mm-hmm.
You and I maybe are among the few people who can understand this moral dilemma. We're also among the very small population of people that understand that this new normal that's being presented is harmful. If somebody was to ask me, can people live in a synthetic electromagnetic environment, I would say no, or not very long, or not very well. But unfortunately, people are either willfully ignorant or they just don't understand. They don't want to understand. Cognitive dissonance, I don't know. But like I say, we not only can feel it, but we know it's harmful and we understand the moral ramifications. So then did Daniel and I go without internet access? Because we wouldn't be doing this right now. We have no other option. I never would have met you. So profound, right? I mean, this is not a small thing, is it?
Yeah.